It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when I decided to spend some time in my study, organizing old photographs and mementos that had gathered dust over the years. The sound of raindrops tapping against the window created a calming backdrop as I sifted through the box of memories. I had always enjoyed this ritual, flipping through snapshots of our life together, reminding myself of the happy moments that defined our journey. Little did I know that this day would take a turn I could never have anticipated. As I rummaged through the box, my fingers brushed against something smooth and glossy. I pulled out an old photo, slightly faded at the edges. It depicted a vibrant art exhibition from a few years ago, a time when Nina and I were both particularly excited about our lives. I smiled as I recognized the backdrop of colorful canvases and vibrant splashes of paint swirling together in an artistic dance. It was a night to remember. We had laughed, shared dreams, and marveled at the creative expressions around us. But as I examined the photo more closely, my heart sank. There, right in the center, was Nina standing next to her business partner, Adam. They were posing closely together, their faces illuminated by the gallery lights. Nina was wearing that red dress I loved, the one that hugged her curves perfectly. She looked radiant, with a carefree smile that seemed to light up the entire room. But what struck me was the way Adam had his arm draped around her waist, his hand resting comfortably against her hip. They looked intimate, almost too comfortable, like a couple lost in their world. A chill ran down my spine as I scrutinized their expressions. It wasn't just a friendly photo, there was a chemistry between them that made my stomach turn. I tried to shake off the unsettling feeling, convincing myself that it was just a moment captured in time, a snapshot of two colleagues celebrating success. But the more I looked, the more the unease settled in. Why hadn't I noticed this before? Had I been blind to the closeness they shared? I tossed the photo aside, attempting to ignore the nagging voice in my head that insisted I investigate further. After all, Nina and I had been together for years, and I trusted her. She had always been open about her work, and I had never suspected anything untoward between her and Adam. But as I returned to the box, the image lingered in my mind like a dark cloud. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze, my thoughts racing. Every laugh shared between Nina and Adam during their office meetings echoed in my ears. Every late-night work session she had mentioned took on a new, sinister meaning. What if there was more to their relationship than I had ever realized? The questions gnawed at me like a relentless predator, each one more troubling than the last. By the time evening rolled around, I felt a pit forming in my stomach. I knew I had to confront this unsettling discovery, but I was terrified of what I might find. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the evidence was there, and it was eating away at my trust. When Nina came home later that night, I tried to act normal, forcing a smile as she entered the living room. She looked beautiful as always, but I felt a distance growing between us. I couldn't shake the image of her with Adam from my mind. It was as if I were standing on the edge of a precipice, looking down into an abyss of uncertainty. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, her voice light and cheerful, unaware of the storm brewing within me. "It was fine," I replied, my tone lacking the usual enthusiasm. "Just went through some old photos." "Really? Which ones?" she inquired, her interest piqued. "Oh, just some memories from that art exhibition we went to a while back," I said, forcing my gaze away from her, afraid that if I looked into her eyes, I might reveal too much. "Ah, that was a fun night," she said, her smile broadening. "I loved that dress." I nodded, feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. I had to know the truth, but I didn't know how to approach it. The photograph lay heavy in my thoughts, a silent witness to the potential betrayal that could shatter everything we had built together. As the evening wore on, I found myself torn between the desire to confront her and the fear of the answers I might receive. I wanted to trust her, to believe that nothing had changed. But deep down, the doubts had taken root, and I knew I had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The days following my accidental discovery of the photograph felt like a slow descent into a shadowy world where trust began to crumble. I found myself on high alert, observing Nina's every move, dissecting her words, and analyzing her behavior with the scrutiny of a detective unraveling a case. It was exhausting, yet I couldn't bring myself to shake off the growing unease that gripped me. Nina had always been a hard-working woman, passionate about her career. I admired her dedication and often encouraged her to pursue her ambitions. But lately, her commitment seemed to cross into the realm of secrecy. I started noticing peculiarities in her routine that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. It began with her frequent late nights at the office. While it was not uncommon for her to stay late to meet deadlines, the pattern had become suspiciously regular. Each evening, she would casually mention her workload with a hint of annoyance. "I have to finish this report," she would say, her tone almost dismissive. But there was something in her eyes that suggested she was hiding more than just a tight schedule. At first, I tried to be understanding, assuring myself that her job was demanding. But the longer it went on, the more I felt like a stranger in my own home. I started counting the number of nights she would return later than usual, 3, 4, sometimes 5 nights in a row. When she finally did come home, her hair would be tousled, and there was often a hint of perfume I didn't recognize lingering in the air. I wanted to believe it was just the scent of the office or a colleague's fragrance, but deep down, I felt a tight knot in my stomach. Her excuses became more elaborate. "I had to meet with a client," she would say, or, "we had an emergency meeting that ran late." I began to notice how her stories never quite added up. When I asked her about specific meetings or clients, she would fumble for details, her eyes darting away as if searching for an escape route from my questions. Then there were the texts. She was glued to her phone more than ever, tapping away at the screen with a nervous energy I had never seen before. Whenever I walked into the room, she would quickly lock her phone or change the subject. Her cheeks flushing in a way that sent chills down my spine. I couldn't help but feel like I was intruding on something private, something she was desperate to keep from me. "Are you okay?" I finally asked one evening, the tension spilling over like an overturned glass. "You seem a bit distracted lately." Nina looked up, surprise evident on her face, but her smile felt forced. "I'm just busy, Richard. You know how it is. Work can be overwhelming sometimes." I nodded, but the response didn't satisfy me. There was a depth to her eyes, a flicker of something that seemed to suggest a conflict within her. I wanted to push her further, to demand answers, but the thought of confronting her left me paralyzed. I didn't want to appear jealous or controlling, I just needed clarity. As days turned into weeks, the gnawing feeling in my gut intensified. My mind raced with possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. Was she truly having an affair? Did Adam have something to do with it? The mere thought of it felt like a dagger to my heart. Yet I found myself trapped in a cycle of suspicion and doubt. One particularly frustrating evening, as I sat alone at the dining table waiting for her to come home, I couldn't shake the feeling of being abandoned. I stared at the empty chair across from me, a stark reminder of the distance that had grown between us. I thought back to the photo, the way they had looked so close, and I felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal wash over me. When she finally arrived, it was late, and the smell of alcohol wafted around her. "Sorry, I lost track of time," she said, her cheeks flushed. "I went out for drinks with some colleagues." I forced a smile, but my heart raced. "You didn't mention anything about that." "I didn't want to bother you," she replied, brushing it off as if it were nothing. But the casual nature of her response stung. My mind reeled with questions. How many times had this happened? Was she out with Adam? At that moment, I realized I could no longer ignore the signs. My trust had been shaken, and I had to confront the reality that something was off. As much as I wanted to believe in her innocence, the evidence felt overwhelming, and I knew I had to dig deeper. The next day, I found myself pondering how to investigate without raising suspicion. I needed answers, but I also needed to tread carefully. The last thing I wanted was to push her further away or cause her to become defensive. Yet, in my gut, I knew I had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The clouds of doubt loomed larger, and I was left grappling with a sinking feeling that the woman I thought I knew might be slipping away from me, one secret at a time. It was a typical Tuesday evening, the kind that had become monotonously familiar in recent weeks. I sat on the couch, flipping through channels, but I couldn't focus on anything for long. My mind was still swirling with doubts and questions about Nina's behavior. It felt like I was trapped in a fog, unable to see the truth behind the veil of secrecy that had enveloped our lives. Nina had gone into the bedroom, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. I didn't think much of it at first, just another late-night call with a client or a colleague, or so I tried to convince myself. But as I sat there, the sound of her voice drifted out to me, punctuated by the soft hum of her laughter. It was a sound that used to bring me joy, but now it was tinged with suspicion. After a few minutes, I noticed her tone change. She sounded serious, and the lightness in her voice faded. My heart began to race as I instinctively leaned closer, straining to catch snippets of her conversation. I felt like a detective in a thriller, tiptoeing through the shadows of my own home, driven by a desperate need to uncover the truth. "I know it's risky," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we have to keep this between us. Adam, you understand how important this is." The mention of Adam sent a jolt through me, a visceral reaction that felt like ice water coursing through my veins. I pressed my ear against the doorframe, straining to hear every word. My heart thudded in my chest, each beat a reminder of my growing dread. "I'll make sure Richard doesn't find out," she continued, her voice low and conspiratorial. "We can't let him get in the way of our plans." A rush of emotions flooded over me: betrayal, anger, confusion. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, the wind knocked out of me by the sheer weight of her words. What plans? What was she hiding from me? The questions spiraled out of control, each one more troubling than the last. "Just meet me tomorrow at the office after hours. I'll explain everything then," Nina said, and I could hear the nervous edge in her voice. "I promise, it'll be worth it." With that, she ended the call, and I felt as though the world had stopped spinning. I leaned back against the wall, my heart racing, trying to process what I had just heard. The realization that Nina was not only hiding something but actively conspiring with Adam sent my mind reeling. I could no longer dismiss my growing suspicions as mere paranoia. The evidence was right in front of me. I felt a wave of emotions wash over me: anger, hurt, and a profound sense of loss. The woman I had loved and trusted for so long was now a stranger, entangled in something that felt dangerously deceptive. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I was paralyzed by fear. What if I was wrong? What if I misinterpreted the situation? I spent the next hour pacing the living room, my mind racing with possibilities. I thought about the late nights, the mysterious phone calls, and the sudden secrecy that had clouded our relationship. Every moment of doubt and every pang of suspicion collided in my mind, painting a picture I had dreaded to see. As the evening wore on, I felt a growing resolve to get to the bottom of this. I couldn't let her continue to deceive me, and I had to gather more evidence before confronting her. The thought of investigating her further was daunting, but I knew I had to do it. I needed to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next day, I devised a plan. I would follow her to the office after hours. I wanted to see for myself what was happening between her and Adam. I had to know if my worst fears were indeed true or if I was allowing my imagination to run wild. That evening, as I prepared to leave the house, I felt a mixture of dread and determination. I was entering unknown territory, but I was ready to confront the darkness that had crept into my life. I silently slipped out the door, my heart pounding as I drove to Nina's office, each beat echoing the uncertainty that now defined my world. As I parked a few blocks away, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I might uncover. The night was heavy with tension, and I knew I was about to step into a reality that could change everything. Would I find the truth I was seeking, or would it shatter me completely? The answers loomed ahead, and I was ready to face whatever lay in the shadows. As I parked a few blocks away, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I might uncover. The night was heavy with tension, and I knew I was about to step into a reality that could change everything. Would I find the truth I was seeking, or would it shatter me completely? The answers loomed ahead, and I was ready to face whatever lay in the shadows. As I peered inside, my breath caught in my throat. There they were, Nina and Adam, sitting at a table in the corner, their laughter echoing in the quiet space. Nina leaned in closer, her hand brushing against Adam's, the intimacy of their gestures sending shockwaves through me. I could see the way Adam smiled, his eyes sparkling with something that felt dangerously familiar. It was a connection I thought only Nina and I shared. I felt my anger simmering just below the surface, but I held it in check, refusing to let my emotions betray me. The sight of them together solidified my worst fears. This was no mere business partnership, it was a web of deceit that had ensnared both of them. As they talked and shared stories, I could see the chemistry radiating between them, a stark contrast to the emptiness that had settled between Nina and me. My hands clenched into fists, and I struggled to breathe as the weight of the betrayal pressed down on me. It was a moment I would never forget, and I realized I had to capture it, to immortalize the truth before I confronted them. In that moment of clarity, I knew that the darkness that had crept into my life was real, and it was time to shine a light on it. As I pulled out my phone to document this painful truth, I felt a surge of determination. I would gather the evidence I needed to confront Nina and expose their treachery. This wasn't just about reclaiming my dignity, it was about holding them accountable for the betrayal that had shattered our life together. I would not allow this moment to slip away into the shadows. After the haunting revelation of Nina's mysterious phone call, I felt a surge of adrenaline and determination coursing through me. I knew I had to gather evidence, to see the reality of what was unfolding behind my back. My heart raced at the thought of following her, but the need for the truth overpowered my fear. I could no longer live in a haze of uncertainty. I had to know whether my suspicions were justified. The following day, I devised a plan. I would take a few days off work, giving me the freedom to observe Nina without raising suspicion. I began by casually mentioning to her that I would be out of the house for a few hours on certain days. Claiming I had errands to run, she seemed preoccupied with her tasks and didn't question my vague explanations. On the first day of my surveillance, I parked a few blocks from Nina's office, the weight of my decision pressing heavily on my chest. I waited anxiously in my car, watching the office building where she worked. Time seemed to crawl as I replayed the events of the past few weeks in my mind, the details of her late nights, the secret phone calls, and the photograph of her with Adam. Finally, as the clock struck 5, Nina exited the building, her phone glued to her ear. I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. I followed her at a safe distance, my heart pounding with each step. She walked purposefully toward a nearby cafe, a place I had never known her to frequent. As I parked across the street, I could see her settle into a cozy corner booth, a place that offered her some privacy. I watched as the minutes ticked by, my breath held tight in my chest. Then, to my horror, I saw Adam walk into the cafe, a casual smile on his face. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal as he approached Nina's table. They exchanged warm greetings, and I caught snippets of their conversation as they leaned in closer to one another. I pulled out my phone, the urge to document this moment overwhelming. With trembling hands, I snapped a few photos of them together. I knew I had to capture this moment, this betrayal, so I could confront her with undeniable proof. I could see their body language, the way they laughed, the glances they shared, everything screamed intimacy. As I continued to observe them, a flood of emotions washed over me, hurt, anger, and a profound sense of loss. The reality of their relationship was crystallizing before my eyes, and I felt my heart shatter with each moment that passed. I wanted to rush in and confront them, but I knew I had to remain calm and collected. The evidence was more powerful than any confrontation fueled by emotion. The meeting lasted for over an hour, during which they exchanged stories and laughter, a world away from the one Nina and I shared. As they finally stood to leave, I captured a few more photos of them walking closely together, Adam's arm casually resting on Nina's shoulder. It was a damning image, one that would haunt me long after the moment had passed. With the evidence now in my possession, I felt a mix of triumph and dread. I had gathered what I needed, but it came at a great emotional cost. As I drove home, I replayed the day's events in my mind, grappling with the gravity of what I had witnessed. The pain of betrayal weighed heavily on me, but there was also a sense of empowerment in knowing the truth. I could no longer be in the dark. As I contemplated my next steps, I realized that I needed a plan for how to confront Nina and Adam. I couldn't just confront them without a strategy. I needed to make a statement, one that would resonate not only with them but also with their colleagues and business partners. I wanted to ensure that their betrayal was not just a private affair but a public revelation that would expose their deceit to the world. With a renewed sense of purpose, I began to sketch out my plan for revenge. I recalled the upcoming business event that Nina had mentioned weeks ago, a gala where her firm would showcase its latest achievements. It was the perfect opportunity for me to execute my plan and make a lasting impact. Nina's colleagues, clients, and business partners would all be present, and I would ensure that they witnessed the truth of her infidelity. I started to plot how I would present my evidence at the event, making it clear to everyone that Nina had betrayed not just our marriage but also the trust of her colleagues. I envisioned a scene that would shatter her carefully crafted facade, a moment that would resonate deeply within the business community. It was a way to not only take back my power but also to expose the duplicity that had woven itself into the fabric of our lives. I spent the next few days preparing meticulously. I organized the photos I had taken, ensuring I had a clear narrative to present. I envisioned how I would confront Nina, how I would unveil the truth in a way that would leave no room for denial. I practiced what I would say, rehearsing the words that would cut through the air like a knife, piercing the veil of deceit that had surrounded us. As the day of the event approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and trepidation. I was stepping into unknown territory, but I was resolute. I would not let Nina's betrayal go unchallenged. I was ready to expose the truth, to reclaim my dignity, and to show her that the consequences of her actions would not be brushed aside. I was done living in the shadows, and I was prepared to step into the light, no matter how painful that light might be. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything, and I was ready to face the truth, no matter the cost. With the evidence in hand and the pain of betrayal simmering within me, I felt an overwhelming need to share my plan with those who truly understood my struggle. The following evening, I gathered my closest friends, Mark and Sarah, at my apartment. They had been my confidants through the highs and lows of my marriage, and I needed their support now more than ever. As I paced the living room, I recounted the events that had led me to this point, from the discovery of Nina's phone call to the incriminating scene I had witnessed. My heart raced as I described how I had seen her and Adam together, laughing and leaning into one another with an intimacy that felt like a dagger to my heart. Each word I spoke felt both liberating and heavy, the reality of my situation pressing down on me. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Mark asked, concern etched on his face. "This could turn your whole life upside down." "I have to," I replied firmly. "I can't let them get away with this. I need everyone to know the truth, especially her business partners. They deserve to see who they're dealing with." Sarah nodded, her expression a mix of sympathy and determination. "I understand why you want to do this. It's about reclaiming your life and standing up for yourself. How can we help?" As I shared my vision for the confrontation at the upcoming business event, the atmosphere shifted from one of concern to a sense of camaraderie. Together, we brainstormed how to make the revelation impactful. I explained my plan to present the evidence in a way that would be undeniable and unforgettable. "We should create a visual presentation," Sarah suggested. "Something that clearly shows what's been going on. Maybe even a slideshow with the photos you took? It'll make it harder for them to deny it." I nodded, the idea resonating with me. "That's perfect. I want to ensure everyone sees the truth in real time. This isn't just about Nina, it's about holding them both accountable." We spent the next few hours mapping out the details, discussing the timing, the location, and how to ensure that key figures in Nina's business were present. Mark suggested we make a dramatic entrance, perhaps by arriving early and ensuring the audience was settled before unveiling the evidence. The more we talked, the more my confidence grew. I felt a sense of purpose that had been absent for far too long. As we wrapped up the evening, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had a plan, and I wasn't alone in this fight. My friends were ready to stand by me, to support me in my quest for truth and justice. Together, we would orchestrate a revelation that Nina would never forget. In the days following my meeting with Mark and Sarah, I began to notice subtle changes in Nina's demeanor. She was acting unusually nervous, her eyes darting around the room as if she were expecting someone to spring a surprise on her. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Perhaps my plan was working even before I had put it into action. Nina started checking her phone constantly, her fingers tapping away in a frenzy. I caught her looking at me from the corner of her eye, a mix of anxiety and apprehension on her face. It was as if she could sense the shift in the air, the tension that had taken root in our home. There was an electricity between us, a palpable uncertainty that I found both exhilarating and troubling. "Is everything okay?" I asked one evening as she sat at the kitchen table, absently stirring her coffee. I was feigning casual concern, though inside, I was relishing the small victory of her discomfort. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind with work," she replied, her voice shaky. "You know how it is." Her attempts to divert my attention felt desperate, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline. It was clear she was trying to regain control over the narrative, to prevent me from uncovering whatever it was she was hiding. I watched her closely, noting how she flinched at the slightest sound, and how she hesitated before answering my questions. As the date of the business event drew closer, Nina's unease became more pronounced. She began to change her routine, leaving the house earlier and coming home later, claiming to be busy with last-minute preparations. But I saw through her facade. She was trying to manipulate the situation, to keep me at bay while she scrambled to cover her tracks. I could sense that she was becoming increasingly paranoid, her suspicions brewing beneath the surface. One evening, while I was flipping through the channels, I caught her watching me from the corner of my eye, her expression unreadable. I felt a jolt of fear, mixed with a sense of empowerment. This was the beginning of the end of our deceptive life together, and she was starting to realize it. I began to feel the weight of our impending confrontation, the reality that soon her world would unravel in front of her. The thought of it thrilled me, but I also knew that I had to remain vigilant. I couldn't afford to let her suspicions grow. I had to keep her unaware of the storm that was about to hit. With each passing day, the tension mounted, and I prepared myself for the revelation that would ultimately bring our tumultuous chapter to a close. I was ready to expose the truth. And I could sense that Nina was beginning to realize that I might know more than I had let on. The stage was set, and soon the curtain would rise on our final act. The day of the business event arrived, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. As I stepped into the lavish venue, my heart raced with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The grandeur of the room, a sprawling space adorned with glimmering chandeliers and elegant decorations, seemed to contrast sharply with the turmoil brewing within me. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the purpose that had brought me here. This was the moment I had prepared for, the culmination of weeks of gathering evidence and planning. I glanced around the room, spotting familiar faces, Nina's colleagues, clients, and business partners. Their laughter and chatter filled the air, but all I could focus on was the goal ahead. My friends, Mark and Sarah, stood by my side, offering silent support as we moved toward the front of the room. It was time to make my presence known. As the event kicked off, Nina appeared radiant, her smile brightening the room. She mingled effortlessly, her laughter ringing out like music. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of doubt. Would I go through with this? But the memory of her betrayal, the laughter she had shared with Adam, flashed through my mind, reigniting my resolve. Finally, the moment came when the host of the event welcomed everyone to take their seats for the presentation. I felt the weight of my heart as I approached the microphone. A hush fell over the crowd, their eyes shifting towards me with curiosity and intrigue. I cleared my throat, and with a steady voice, I began. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "Thank you for being here tonight. I know this may not be the usual presentation you were expecting, but I believe in the importance of transparency, especially in a business environment where trust is paramount." A murmur rippled through the audience, and I could see Nina's face shift from a warm smile to a look of confusion and concern. I continued, "What I'm about to reveal may come as a shock to many of you, especially to those who know my wife, Nina." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle over the crowd. For years, she has been an esteemed partner in this business, but what I've uncovered is not just a breach of trust in our marriage. It's a betrayal that extends beyond our personal lives. I clicked a button on the remote in my hand, and the projector behind me whirred to life. The screen illuminated, revealing the first image, a candid photo of Nina and Adam at the cafe, their closeness unmistakable. Gasps filled the room as the audience absorbed the visual evidence of their affair. I could see shock written on the faces of her colleagues, the realization dawning on them as they processed what I was presenting. "This," I continued, my voice steady and resolute, "is just the beginning. These images document not just a personal betrayal but a shared deceit that has implications for this business." I clicked through several more images, each one capturing moments of intimacy and laughter between Nina and Adam. The room fell into a stunned silence as the truth unfolded before their eyes. I could see Nina's expression morph from confusion to disbelief, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Adam stood to the side, his face paling as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. The atmosphere shifted, the air thick with tension as I laid bare the truth that had festered in the shadows. I took a deep breath, feeling the power of the moment surge within me. These images show not just personal betrayal but a lack of integrity that affects everyone here. Trust is essential in both marriage and business, and I believe you all deserve to know who you're dealing with. The audience erupted into whispers and gasps, the realization settling in like a heavy fog. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others murmured in hushed tones, casting sidelong glances at Nina and Adam. I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. This was not just my fight but a stand for everyone who had been deceived in the name of trust. As I stepped back from the microphone, I watched the chaos unfold. Nina's eyes filled with tears, a mix of anger and despair flashing across her face. Adam attempted to speak, but the crowd's reaction drowned him out. I could see the cracks forming in her carefully constructed world, and a sense of satisfaction coursed through me. I had done it. I had exposed their betrayal to the world. And the truth could no longer be hidden. As the murmurs grew louder and the atmosphere shifted dramatically, I realized that this was not just an end but also a new beginning. The weight of the burden I had carried for so long was finally lifting, and I felt a flicker of hope for what lay ahead. The night had become a turning point, a moment of reckoning not just for Nina and Adam, but for me as well. I was ready to step forward into a future unclouded by deceit, ready to reclaim my life and my peace. The aftermath of my revelation unfolded like a scene from a play, with Nina and Adam at the center of the drama. As the initial shockwave rippled through the room, I watched their expressions shift from disbelief to horror. Nina's carefully crafted image as a successful businesswoman began to crumble, revealing the vulnerability beneath her polished exterior. The whispers swirled around us, echoing in the grand hall. I could hear snippets of conversations filled with disbelief and judgment, the crowd processing what they had just witnessed. Nina stood frozen, her cheeks flushed with humiliation, while Adam fumbled for words, attempting to defend their actions. It was a desperate and futile attempt. The evidence was irrefutable, and the truth hung heavy in the air. I felt a surge of satisfaction wash over me as I observed the fallout. This was the moment I had envisioned. The public exposure of their deceit had struck a chord with the audience, many of whom were their colleagues and clients. Nina's reputation, once revered, was now hanging by a thread. I could see the weight of their betrayal sinking in, and I felt a bittersweet sense of vindication. As the event continued, Nina's demeanor changed. She became increasingly withdrawn, and her confidence shattered. Conversations that once flowed easily around her now turned into awkward silences as people struggled to know how to react. I saw her cornered by a few of her closest colleagues, their expressions a mix of concern and judgment. She attempted to maintain composure, but I could see the cracks deepening with every passing moment. Adam, on the other hand, tried to salvage his dignity, attempting to justify their actions to those around him. It was a mistake, he insisted, his voice trembling. We didn't mean for it to come to this. But the more he spoke, the worse it became. His words fell flat, and the audience was quick to dismiss him, their gazes shifting back to Nina, who was now on the verge of tears. As I watched their downfall unfold, a mix of emotions surged within me. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but seeing Nina stripped of her facade brought me a sense of closure. She had spun a web of deceit, and now the truth had ensnared her. It was a moment of poetic justice, and I relished every second of it. The feeling of revenge was intoxicating. I had taken back my power, and it felt exhilarating. When the event finally came to a close, the room felt charged with unresolved tension. Nina and Adam stood together, their faces pale, surrounded by whispers and judgment. I knew their lives would never be the same, their reputations had been irreparably damaged. As I made my way toward the exit, I couldn't help but steal a glance back at them. I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me, knowing that I had played a role in their public downfall. In the weeks that followed the revelation, I found myself on a path of rediscovery. With Nina and Adam's fall from grace, I was liberated from the shackles of betrayal and heartache. It felt as though a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders, allowing me to breathe freely for the first time in years. I began to focus on myself, diving into my passions and interests that had long been neglected. I took up painting again, rediscovering the joy of expressing myself through colors and canvas. Each brushstroke felt cathartic, a release of the emotions I had bottled up for far too long. I signed up for art classes, eager to learn and improve my skills. It was a refreshing change, and I relished the opportunity to create something beautiful out of my pain. I also started spending more time with Mark and Sarah, who had been my unwavering support during the entire ordeal. Our friendship deepened as we shared laughter, adventures, and countless late-night conversations. They reminded me of the importance of surrounding myself with those who uplifted and inspired me. Together, we explored new places, tried different cuisines, and celebrated life in all its forms. With each passing day, I felt a renewed sense of confidence blossoming within me. I started taking care of my health, hitting the gym regularly, and embracing a lifestyle that fostered my well-being. I had spent so many years living in the shadows of someone else's choices. Now it was time to step into the light and reclaim my life. As the months rolled by, I found solace in the knowledge that I was moving forward. I had emerged from the storm a stronger person, unafraid to pursue what I truly wanted. The pain of the past had transformed into a source of strength, fueling my desire to create a fulfilling life for myself. Looking back on the chaos that had once consumed me, I realized that the experience, while painful, had ultimately been a catalyst for change. I had taken control of my narrative, rewriting the story of my life. The betrayal had been a chapter in my journey, but it no longer defined me. With newfound freedom and confidence, I stepped into the future, ready to embrace whatever came next. My heart was open, my spirit unburdened, and I was finally at peace. This was my new beginning, a chapter filled with possibilities, and I was determined to make it a beautiful one.